Welcome back. During our visit at Under the Stars Naseeha Fundraising Gala, we had the pleasure of interviewing Imam Khalid Latif's wife, Priya Chandra. Priya completed her master's in social work and is a rape crisis and domestic violence counselor. We had the opportunity to talk to her about some of these issues she has come across in her work, including sex trafficking and, yes, within the Muslim community in the United States. While we do not discuss in extensive detail, please be wary that this interview may trigger feelings of trauma, so do connect to appropriate support systems if you need to. And with that, here is our interview now. Welcome to the show, Priya.
Thank you for having me.
So I know you flew with 2 kids and your husband Imam Khalid Latif all the way to Toronto to support the Naseeha Muslim Youth Helpline. Why did you trek the journey?
It's an important cause for the two of us. We absolutely believe in addressing mental health issues and addressing any kind of social and personal challenges that people might have.
Yeah.
And I thought it was actually a very unique way to address issues in a community that's often shied away from talking about mental health issues because of stigma, because of shame, and whatever you want to call it. And I love the innovative approach to it. It's not I haven't seen it before. I'm like, they saw a need and they addressed it, and I thought that was great.
And why do you think it's important to have a youth line specific to Muslims?
Absolutely.
Why?
Although I think that I believe, because I see it, that the issues that the Muslim youth face are very similar to what the general population faces, there are certain cultural nuances and certain religious nuances that get lost in the mix. And for people who are already struggling with whether or not to get help, being put in a situation where they feel that they will be misunderstood because of the cultural, religious context they're coming from, or that they might end up having to educate somebody in order to be understood, that's a lot of burden to put on somebody. So I think a helpline that's dedicated to Muslim youth, that's also run by Muslims, was much needed in the community. Other religious communities have done it before with fantastic results. There is an excellent program in New York where for the Orthodox Jewish women, where they offer, similar to Naseeha, they offer help on through a helpline. And it's entirely staffed with Orthodox women for Orthodox women. And I always thought that would be a great thing. You guys stole Naseeha stole my idea before I could do it.
You
but
can still do it.
That's the beauty of it, that somebody saw the need. And I was even more impressed that I met Brother Yassine, and he doesn't come from a mental health background.
Yeah.
But he made it happen, and I thought that was really inspiring. So it made me even happier that I'm here.
So I know you did your master's in social work, and you do a lot of work within the social work field. So tell me a little bit about some of the issues that you've dealt with.
I've been lucky. I've dealt with a variety of issues. I had exposure to different kinds of settings, different kind of populations. So my entry point into social work was through being a rape crisis and domestic violence advocate / counselor. So I would work in the emergency rooms at various hospitals in Manhattan. And I found that to be it was fulfilling work. It was hard work, but it was fulfilling work. And then I started my master's in social work. And through that, I ended up, I worked with population that was about 90% affected or infected with HIV and AIDS. I worked in an adult inpatient psychiatric unit where I dealt with severe mental illness, so schizophrenia, bipolar.
And you're dealing with not just Muslims, so people of all faith backgrounds,
right? I actually haven't worked in a specifically Muslim setting, but it is New York. It's a very diverse population, so I have come across Muslims in every one of these settings. And then I also worked in a human trafficking court as doing trauma-focused care for survivors of sex trafficking. And now I work in a community mental health setting where pretty much I deal with everything from 5-year-olds with behavioral issues to 65-year-olds with schizophrenia. So it's a little
You've
bit
got
of
the
everything.
full range.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a long career, but I've been fortunate to experience a little bit of different things. So it's been.
I want to focus a little bit because I don't think we've ever talked about the issue of human trafficking on our show.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about that experience and the fact that you even came across it. That too in New York, right?
Yeah. So it is fitting that it was in New York because New York State now has 8 human trafficking courts to deal specifically with this issue. I didn't go out looking to work in this population. It came to me because I was interested in doing my passion before I started master's program, and my passion still is working with women in the field of trauma.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to get familiar with trauma-informed care, and this was presented to me, and I said trafficking. But we're in America, what would I do?
Exactly.
And as much as I had been exposed to different things, I hadn't been exposed to anything to do with trafficking. So how it was presented to me was that, you have a domestic violence advocate background, you have a rape crisis counselor background. Trafficking, look at it as all of that and with much more, but it's very severe trauma. So I looked at it as a crash course on trauma, so I took it on, and it was a very eye-opening experience. A lot of myths were shattered. All of my clients were domestically trafficked. So the idea that they have to come from Eastern Europe or anywhere outside was what it was. It was a myth. And it was eye-opening also because I actually did come across Muslims as well.
Who were human trafficked?
Who were trafficked. And those were not things that I was expecting. So I had to educate myself on that.
Welcome back to the show, Priya. So we started talking about human trafficking, and you mentioned, when you were working in that field, you were dealing with women who weren't necessarily trafficked from abroad, but rather in New York itself. So can you share a little bit about what that was like and what you dealt with?
Well, I felt like my entire time at this job, I had to constantly reevaluate certain previously believed notions, be willing to change my positions on things because everything that I thought I knew was being put in question.
Give me an example. You said you had to change your preconceived notions. Notions about
preconceived notions were such that trafficking is typically done with women from overseas, women from Asia, women from Eastern Europe, and it's not something that happens here.
In
that
the
was
United
something.
States.
Yeah, and that's something that was not true at all because 100% of my clients were from the U.S.
All of them.
All of them. And another time that it took me by surprise and I had to come to terms with was coming across a couple of Muslim clients
Who were trafficked.
Who were in situations and places and had experiences that I never imagined possible, and which only served as a reminder that we're not exempt from the issues that affect the larger population. The society we live in affects us as much as it affects the non-Muslims. That was something else that I encountered. And I think the biggest myth that I held onto for a while was that trafficking happened under visible duress. There were tangible signs of holding someone hostage in a certain way, in a certain place. And
like in the movies where they're locked away in the
basement, for years, and you don't
thing.
hear about them. I mean, as unfortunate as those circumstances are, and as true as sometimes that they are, these women were working outside. They were free to move around. They traveled. They talked to me about when they lived in California or when they went to visit their family in Michigan. One of them came from my little small very conservative Christian town where I could not possibly imagine anyone not, anyone being in.
Saw very close to you in the community. And you had no idea.
No idea. And so what I had to understand through this experience was that the shackles that keep people within what is in some people have defined as a kind of modern age slavery aren't physical shackles, they're invisible shackles. The shackles are usually of human relationships.
Give me an example, so just so our viewers understand, when you say invisible shackles, what do you mean by that?
I mean that what keeps them in these difficult relationships, what keeps them in these bad situations and difficult relationships, by that I mean their relationship to their pimps, is because they were the only people that ever cared for them. So in the absence of the absence of relationships that failed to live up to what they were meant to be, so in the absence of parents that treated them well, or in the absence of friends that were there during difficult times, someone else stepped in and offered the only thing that they were looking for, which was human connection. And even though it came with its own complications, they would take that, because at the end of the day, if they had that connection, nothing else mattered. And that was a harder thing to break. It was very difficult to convince any of these women to ever press charges against their pimps, to get to a place where even when they had an inbuilt incentive to do it, where they could have complete immunity from any of the charges that were pressed against them, with complete vacation of their entire criminal history, and they would still not take it because there was that connection, that the only connection that they've had. So that was the hardest thing to swallow, because
I can tell, I mean, even as you're talking about it, it is a difficult conversation. I don't want to get into too many details because it is a sensitive topic. Just as we wrap up, what advice do you have for our community? Because you just talked about an example where it was, I think even off air, you told me it was literally 3 miles from where you live. What advice do you have for us as a community to help women in these situations, whether or not we may know about them?
I think just mainly starting with educating yourself, not being educating yourself to understand what these issues mean, who it affects, how it affects them, because even if it's not affecting you or your family members, if it affects someone in your community, I would like to believe that responsibility will still be with each of us in the community. Because in addition to the shame that's involved in each of these situations, the painful thing that people are dealing with is also the judgment that's coming from people that are not in their situations.
Final question for you. If there's someone that is watching our show, and they are in a relationship where they do have these invisible shackles, not to the extent of the definition of being trafficked, whatever, that's a very loaded term, but what advice do you have? Someone watching our show who's in this situation and they're stuck, what would you say to them? One quick sentence.
I would say that I'm not in your situation. You've lived through your experiences, and you are the expert of your situation. If it is safe for you to do so, and you feel like you're in a position to attempt to understand where you are at and change that, then there are resources out there for you.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.